Our special guest today at AICGS is Ralf Fücks. He is the president of the Heinrich Böll Foundation, a political foundation in Germany who is closely associated with the Green Party, which is currently the main opposition party in the German parliament. Ralf Fücks, welcome at AICGS. You mentioned foreign policy challenges, and one very recent foreign policy challenge comes to mind, and that's the case of the Ukraine. And you mentioned the fact that Europeans don't usually speak with one voice, and on the Ukraine as well, there seems to be different priorities. Of course, for neighboring countries like Poland and other Middle and Eastern European countries, or the Baltics, or even Germany, this is probably the most or the biggest challenge at the borders of the European Union. But if you speak to Italian officials, for instance, they would say, yes, Ukraine is a big challenge, but for us, the Mediterranean and Libya is a much bigger challenge. Yeah. So how do you square these different positions? How do you square the circle?
Of course, you have different geographical orientations and also different cultural and political narratives. We have the southern European countries, which always have been more directed to the south, and we have the central European countries, which have been oriented more to the east. And of course, the challenge is to develop a common European policy to our southern and eastern neighborhood. It's not an either-or alternative. Yeah, so dealing with the uproar and the crisis in the Middle East and in the Maghreb countries is also extremely important for Europe than it is dealing with the developments on our eastern borders. But of course, in the moment, the developments around the Ukraine are shaking European policies in their fundaments. It's and of course in the core of this challenge is Russia. Russia is of extreme high political and economic importance for Europe. The whole European stability order is based on a kind of arrangement with Russia. And if the old view that we could develop a kind of partnership with Russia, even a strategic partnership, as it was the language in Germany, turns out to be illusionary, that we are entering a new period of conflict with Russia. This will change the European politics basically, and it's up to now it's not clear what will be the outcome of the Ukrainian crisis. Most of our elites hope it will just go over and we can return to the status quo until this kind of integration, cooperation with Russia. I doubt that.
You doubt that?
I doubt that.
The Green Party has been very critical of the German government's response to the Ukraine challenge. Why?
I would say very critical in the meaning that we suggested a completely different policies. We had been criticizing the government that they had been too hesitating in taking a clear position both towards the Ukraine and Russia, supportive to the democratic transition which has started in Ukraine with the Maidan movement, which was a pro-European movement, not only in terms of economic association with the EU, but in terms of values. Yeah, it was a movement about European values, rule of law, liberty, responsible and transparent government, anti-corruption, and we felt there was a lack of empathy.
On the European side?
Yeah, from
Yes.
the European side with this movement.
We were all too busy squabbling amongst ourselves about the various aspects of the Euro crisis, and there was this sort of notion of the crisis fatigue. So every sort of outside challenge was viewed as a nuisance.
And from the beginning, there was another element that the political and economic elites shied away from a potential conflict with Russia.
Yes.
So declaring European solidarity with the Ukraine at the same time would bring us into a confrontative posture with Russia, and the ambition of the current Russian leadership to reconstruct the Soviet sphere of influence.
I'm going to quote you, because you have written for a German publication under the title "Germany and Russia: as much cooperation as possible, as much conflict as necessary." What do you mean by that?
I think we need a kind of dual strategy towards Russia. It will not be possible to promote a policy of isolation and containment. Political and economic ties between Russia and Europe are too strong. At the same time, it will be not possible to return to business as usual, to try to revive the economic and political cooperation in all areas. So we will have to draw clear lines with respect to sovereignty of the Central and Eastern European states, of their right to choose their coalitions and associations, and with respect to the integrity of borders, which can't be revised by force from greater powers like Russia. And this is opening of the box of Pandora. Yeah. And saying if Russia and the current leadership, which I don't like to identify Putin and his crew with the Russian society, although in the moment 80% of the Russian population is infected by this nationalistic mood. So, but if Russia is not ready to respect these fundamental rules, there have to be clear sanctions, and there has to be a price tag for this kind of aggressive and expansionist policy. But on the same, on the other hand, we have to offer Russia a serious as an option for cooperation and integration based on international law and then human rights.
Now, one of the elements, of course, that is always mentioned both in Europe and on this side of the Atlantic is the question of the strong ties in the energy sector that Europe in general, and particularly some of the European countries and economies have with Russia, with Russian gas and oil supplies. And that sort of brings us back to your topic in a way, because how do we deal with that? How do you think that this crisis will finally provide the necessary wake-up call for European leaders and European institutions to develop a plan B, a plan C, something that makes the continent less dependent on energy supplies from Russia?
I think this will be one of the outcomes of the crisis, that we are in a speed learning process, that this deep dependency from Russia when it comes to the European energy supply makes us politically vulnerable. So reducing energy dependence from Russia now quickly over the last weeks became almost common sense in the European public and the political elites. So the idea we had been promoting for years for a new European energy policy, a united European energy policy, is gaining ground. But there are very different views what this common European energy policy should be about.
Yes.
Should it about increasing nuclear, building new nuclear power plants? Should we rely, as Poland suggests, should we rely more on coal?
Which Germans are already doing.
Or should we, no, that's not the case. On the medium and long term, we will phase out coal.
Yeah.
This is a very short-term reaction to the phasing out of half of our nuclear capacity, and the competitive advantage of written off old coal power plants compared to new gas plants. So this is only
a transition.
A transitional, a very short transitional period. For us, it's an opportunity to push the energy transition agenda, to increase the speed in developing renewable energies, to increase energy efficiency. Energy savings is a huge potential, especially in Central Eastern Europe. You have an enormous waste of resources. So it could be an opportunity to link the environmental and climate agenda with the energy independence agenda, and bringing the European countries together vis-a-vis Russia. So up to now, Russia was able to play a kind of rule and divide game with the European neighbors. We all have different gas prices. We all have different treaties with Russia. And we have to join our policies and act as
one.
As one, yeah.
But is it also, going beyond the energy sector and beyond the Ukraine/Russia challenge? Isn't that a wake-up call for European leaders to understand, in a way, the weaknesses that the Euro crisis exposed were exploited by outside actors?
I would say the positive view would be that this crisis leads to kind of re-energizing of the European integration. That we discover again that Europe is not only about an internal market and some coordination of environmental or immigration policies. It is a political project. Europe united and free, the old idea from '89, is now coming back. And the awareness that Europe is very much about shared values. So maybe we will rediscover the European Union as a political project. This would be, despite of all difficulties, a positive outcome of that crisis.
Ralf Fücks, thank you very much.
Thank you.